Hi, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Winter 2026 installment of the Faculty Professional Development Series. Today's topic is AI in lecture courses, which is serving as a companion to the Fall 2025 lecture, in which we explored how AI is being incorporated into studio class settings, as well as its observed impact on student work and the creative process. So this afternoon, we're shifting our focus to the lecture format, examining how liberal arts instructors in particular are navigating utilizing AI in the classroom. We're joined today by our guest speakers, Vince Carducci and Nancy Demerdash, whose presentations will be followed by a Q&A session. Dr. Carducci is Dean Emeritus, a liberal arts adjunct instructor, and a multidisciplinary scholar holding a PhD and MA from the New School for Social Research. His research integrates aesthetics and social science to examine cultural production across fine arts and popular culture. A recipient of the Kresge Arts in Detroit Literary Fellowship for Art Criticism, his writing has appeared in publications including Art Forum, Art in America, and iMagazine. Beyond academia, Dr. Carducci's work as a visual artist is held in the MoMA archives, and he previously worked in corporate communications, primarily in the financial sector. Dr. Demerdash is an associate professor of art history. She holds a PhD and an MA from Princeton University and a Master of Science in Architecture Studies from MIT's Aga Khan program for Islamic Architecture. Her scholarship bridges the modern and contemporary art and architecture of the Middle East and Africa. Dr. Demerdash has previously taught at Albion College, School of the Art Institute of Chicago, DePaul, and Wells College. Her forthcoming book, The Architectural Politics of Tunisian Modernity, Reconstruction, Decolonization, and Development, is under contract with the University of Nebraska Press. So please join me in welcoming our speakers today, and we'll kick off with Vince Carducci.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for the generous introduction. So, we were just talking a little bit before we got started about, the fact that these presentations, I think, have a nice synergy to them. I'm really going to be more concerned about how I'm using it as an instructor versus what Nancy is going to do. I do get into some of that. So let me share my screen and we can get started. Okay. I'm trying to get that out of the way. All right, great. So, why is this not advancing? Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can see.
Okay. All right. So, I just want to start with this quote from Socrates on writing from the Phaedrus. For this invention will produce forgetfulness in the minds of those who learn to use it, because they will not practice their memory. Their trust in writing produced by external characters, which are no part of themselves, will discourage the use of their own memory within them. You offer your pupils the appearance of wisdom, not true wisdom, for they will read many things without instruction and will therefore seem to know many things, when they are for the most part ignorant and hard to get along with, since they are not wise, but only appear wise, which is kind of interesting in terms of our discussion of AI, because, I think we see certain similar concerns here for us. Of course, the irony is the only reason we know Socrates said this is because Plato wrote it down. So, and somehow we seem to have survived that. There, in the post-war era, there was a critique of other directedness, which was based on essentially the emergence of television. And so that would be David Reisman's book, The Lonely Crowd, among others. So, this is something we have to kind of confront. And so my thought in doing that was to have access to another one of Plato's texts, which is the Symposium. And this is an image from ancient Greece of a dinner party. And of course, the Symposium takes place at a dinner party and is all about conversation and the Socratic method. And so I've taken that as my cue in terms of how I manage my class, which is to say, I am really using AI as a productivity tool for myself in order to spark conversation in the classroom. I set up probably to the annoyance of some other liberal arts faculty members, I set up my rooms in a symposium format. And, of course, I assign readings, and then we spend some time talking about them in class, and then we actually do work in class. So I'm getting an idea. First of all, I guess one of the advantages I have is that in both of the classes I'm teaching right now, several of the students are students I've had before, and so I know what they can do. So I'm pretty comfortable with, kind of trusting them. So this is from class on Monday. This is from my American Consumer Culture class, which is listed as a history class, but I'm teaching it as a social science class, and the designation is going to change for next semester. In this particular module, we're talking about spaces of consumption. So I have them reading two articles. One is Sharon Zukin's Consuming Authenticity. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Sharon, she teaches at CUNY. She is an early analyst of gentrification, in particular her book Loft Living. Now, in more recent years, she's been interested in consumerism in general. So one of the things is, this is a difficult read. I ask students to read academic papers, and in a lot of academic papers, there's little arguments going back and forth about why this person's wrong and this person's right, and literature reviews. None of that is stuff that students are interested in. And so what I do is following ed tech's guidelines in terms of font and things like that, I go through and edit those articles down to get them to be about 4,500 words. And so I'm only going to show the first page of this. And so what I do then is after I've had that edit, so I've been through there, I know what I want the students to take out of it. So then I put in a prompt and I like Gemini. I had access to ChatGPT, the higher level at U of M, Grok. I've used several of these, and I just feel like Gemini works for me, and it recognizes me, and so the algorithms are kind of keeping track of what I'm asking for, and so ends up, I think, getting better and better. So this is the prompt: create a section-by-section study guide of key concepts and questions of this article for undergraduate art and design students in the consumer culture class. So I'm giving it what is the level of the student, what is their major, or what they're interested in, what is the class. And then these are the next sentence is about things we're talking about in class. Pay special attention to concepts of authenticity, cultural and social capital, because we've read Bourdieu already at the beginning of the class, and consumer space. It doesn't show the rest of the prompt, but it's be sure to discuss in turn Union Square, Soho, and Fulton Market. So those are the spaces that Sharon analyzes. And so this is what it came up with. First, the myth of and construction of authenticity. Again, this is a key issue. Some bullet points, then a study question. The second piece gets into Union Square and how the consumption process has worked there, what happens when it gets to be popular to the point where Whole Foods moves in across the street, and how does that work together? So we're having conversations. Again, this is all based on concepts coming from the consumer culture class. And then in the end, it gives some summary information. Now, I've asked them to read a second article, which is about theme parks. So you have the local, gritty, gentrified, to the totally constructed, fabricated, global. And so then the next thing, I wanted to show this. This just gives a breakdown of, because this article compares, in particular, Soho and Union Square with the Fulton Street Market, which is like kind of gentrified versus a Black public sphere. And so again, we're very interested in questions of race, gender, and class. And so, we want to cover all of these things. And then finally, I take those two articles, which again, I've edited them down to what I want, and I synthesize the two articles and create 4 in-class exercises with a 30-minute time limit for undergraduate art and design students in the consumer culture class. So it comes back with this. And of course, I go in and edit them and I pull out the things that I don't like, put in things that I do like. And so this gives the kind of a yin and yang of corporate theme park and authentic neighborhood. And it then creates these 4 exercises. This is really about how brand origin stories get translated into consumer space. So this is one exercise. Another one is to map out how space becomes exclusionary. So one of the things that happens in Union Square is that, it was a lot of drugs, all kinds of things happening there. I also show an image. Andy Warhol's factory studio was on Union Square back in the day. This next one is, again, grit to gloss, how gentrification becomes kind of like cleaning up of space. And then this last one deals with, Disney and Whole Foods and the way in which they have kind of glossed over what is, the original site. And so now what do I do with these things? I hand them out. First of all, I divide the class into groups and I give them all 4 and I let them choose the one that they want to work on. So we take a half an hour and then we have a discussion about it. We report back. Now, before I've done this, I've already had a slideshow that has gone through what I want them to take away from these readings. So in this first one, 2 of the groups took this one and created products. And of course, Disney was kind of the obvious thing. And this gives the students a chance to use their creative chops and put the concept into practice. So they came up with, it's interesting, with the case of Disney, how did they design the bottle? Also, how did they connect it to the origin of Disney Springs? And so that was a really great conversation. This second one was looking at Eastern Market. And in particular, one of the students had been going there with his parents from when he was a kid. So he had a lot to say about that transition that's happened over the time with the murals in the market and all kinds of things like that. Interestingly, in this one exercise, I have one student who's, got this mop of hair that covers his face and he kind of sits there and looks at his computer. But when it came time to report back, I heard more from this student in that 15 minutes than the entire semester. So, I think it's kind of an interesting way of taking that, again, the symposium idea and putting it into practice. And I've used AI to help me. So also, I like to do current events. And so this is, can you see this? This is an article from the New York Times on Braden Peters, known as Clavicular, who is an influencer on looks maxing. Now, I don't know anything about this. And so, again, I basically went to, hang on a second here. This is in my way. I went to AI to kind of like have it help me figure this out. So, create a set of in-class discussion questions based on this article from the New York Times for art and design students. Probe in particular lookism as a characteristic of success. Also the way in which looks maxing participates in relationship and other markets. And so again, we're bringing in marketplace culture, cultural capital, which, is what influencing is really kind of, and social capital, which are concepts of the consumer culture class. And from there, we created this in-class discussion. Now, this was at the very beginning of class, so that we can just kind of take something from current events and have the students be able to, talk about things that they're familiar with from, their own experience. And yet again, applying class concepts to what it is we're talking about. So again, the social market as a metaphor. This one is kind of interesting. This Photoshop as a medical blueprint, because essentially what this guy does is he started by adjusting his face using Photoshop, and from there use that as a model to have like surgery and things like that. Kind of crazy, but again, this is delving into very kind of contemporary issues of consumer culture. Now, so I also want everyone to know that, I do expect uh, students to be, ethical, responding to what they do. So all of my, if you look at my assignments, it's got this statement. I put that highlight on there. That's not in the actual screen grab. But, as a liberal arts student, it is expected your final deliverable, and I use deliverable instead of paper because I've got a couple of students who have done videos and other kinds of ways of doing a final project. It must be of your own creation. It sets out, what it is they have to do, linked to the liberal arts department. One thing I do is I do not say you can talk to AI. That is an anthropomorphizing of that technology, and I think it's a bad thing. So my recommendation, if James is here, I would strike that language from the liberal arts policy.
I'm just
Just
going to pop in, Vince, and say you have 2 minutes.
okay, great. I'm almost done. All right. So, so this opens up the story of what the bigger concern or the bigger question of AI. We we're in class on Wednesday. The design history class, we looked at Fordism. And so I had this quote from Volume 1 of Capital: "In the manufacturing workshop and in craft labor, tools serve the worker. In the factory, the worker serves the machine." And so this is really a question I feel like we have to deal with as it relates to this technology. And so one of the things, this is last semester in my media studies class, I had Grok make a critique of artificial intelligence. Did a pretty good job, actually. And then amusingly at the end, it said, well, we shouldn't abandon AI. We should use it as a prosthesis rather than a replacement, rigorously audited. Unhappily, if you look at the last paragraph, we're choosing another path. I don't think it's going to end up well. This is Grok telling us this. And so, to me, this then opens up that question. And so to deal with that, I had in the media studies class, and of course, we're talking about media, so we got to talk about AI. That was the last module. And this is People's Guide to AI by Mother Cyborg, who is actually Diana Nucera. She's a Kresge Fellow. She lives in Detroit. She's written this book, which has got some good stuff in it. So we did this activity, which is to understand algorithms. And we did this in class. What are the devices you're using? How do they impinge, or make themselves known in your life? To go through and think about what are the AI functions in the technology that you use. What's the good thing? What's the bad thing? And then, to think about how you might create an AI tool. And so, this seemed like a pretty useful way to get into that kind of a question. Now, again, I feel that it's also incumbent on us to talk to the students about other aspects of AI. And interestingly, Grok turned me on to this book, Kate Crawford's, hang on a second, I got to get my cursor in the right place. Kate Crawford's Atlas of AI, which starts right at the extraction of precious metals and heavy metals and goes through the way in which AI is kind of working. And it's the classic text. It should be in our library. We should be using it. But this is a project that she did with the artist Trevor Paglen, where she looked at machine learning as it relates to images. And this is some of the stuff, again, so that we know. If you probe further into the data set, people begin to appear: cheerleaders, scuba divers, welders, Boy Scouts. Then things get strange. A photograph of a woman smiling in a bikini is labeled as slattern slut, slovenly woman. And so if we, the geeks say garbage in, garbage out. And so I think we really need to be circumspect about this technology, because a lot of what we're seeing, especially in the media, is essentially industry propaganda. And we need to really be more, I think, uh, 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 critical of it. One of the things that's really interesting is that there's a whole analysis of training AI and how this has happened. And in particular, there's one aspect, the Japanese female facial expression database, that has been used. And the women that were in this were actresses or actors who were imitating certain emotional gestures. So it's already fake. And so, again, I really feel like we need to take some time and think about that. And so, what does all of that mean? So I think, again, we're doing AI. And so, okay, great. What do we want what do we want people to know? I'm not seeing any learning outcomes at this point. So first of all, they should be able to navigate the mechanics, evaluate the output, recognize the ethical issues, power dynamics that are here, also engage in reflective practice and mitigate over-reliance. And so then those competencies would be engaging in higher order thinking, not just image retrieval, moving beyond prompting to acknowledging the systems beyond AI, recognizing how AI influences social interactions, learning, including the risk of reducing human interaction. And so I just have a few resources that I would encourage people to look at. In particular, the first one, which is about cognitive offloading and what's happening there as it relates to critical thinking, if that's what we're trying to do. This interview with Paul Carducci, done by Paul Krugman, is really interesting in terms of what are the realities of this technology. And of course, they're talking about economics, decolonialism, and again, how are we acting with this in that space? And then finally, data as capital. Because essentially, we are now in a space, Alvin Toffler called it the prosumer, where everything we enter into digital technologies is essentially, we're entertaining ourselves, we're talking to our friends. That's all becoming data that is becoming essentially sold to us. And so going back to that quote from Marx, are we running the machine or is the machine running us? And so that's kind of the philosophical question that I think we should be dealing with. And that is my presentation. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Vince, for that. I'll go ahead and get started.
There's a question here. Are we going to,
sorry.
do you want to save those at the end?
Yes, Vince, we'll hold all questions till the end.
Okay, great. That makes sense.
Okay. Can everybody see my screen? All right. We're good?
Yep,
Yes.
we're good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. So I am going to be building a little bit on what Vince just mentioned vis-a-vis faculty preparation, right? Using AI in order to prepare for your courses on a day-to-day basis. But I'll also be talking about getting students to actually engage with and use AI in the classroom so that they can then see for themselves its shortcomings and pitfalls. And so anyways, that's kind of the breakdown of my presentation for today. Obviously, I'm approaching this as an art historian, and I am not the be-all, end-all expert by any means on the subject. There's been a lot of academic interest in how AI is being used for art history pedagogy. So here I'm showing you a panel that was listed for the Association for Art History, which is the UK's version of the CAA. That panel is going to take place, I think, in a few weeks, and usually their conference is in April. And then the CAA also just had a couple of really interesting panels on AI, also for both artistic purposes and kind of pedagogical purposes. I wasn't able to go to CAA last week because I got sick, but anyways, that's just sort of how the discourse is evolving within the art historical discipline. So my concern really is trying to develop our students' AI critical literacy. Now, I'm sure all of us on this call have heard the term critical literacy before, obviously referring to students' not only a capacity or ability to engage with difficult texts and the world around them and ask hard questions about their environment, right? Sort of being able to read both images and text with equal criticality. But I want my students also to be able to engage with AI in a way that it's also deeply critical, right? So one problem area that I've found kind of stems from a very basic assignment that all art historians give in their survey courses, which is a formal analysis. I'm sure all of us, again, most of us on this call, have had to conduct a formal analysis in our art historical or artistic design training. It was founded, the sort of technique or method was founded by a Swiss art historian named Heinrich Wölfflin in the 19th century, who basically used the method of visual description to kind of discern between the Renaissance style and the Baroque style, right? So the Renaissance, obviously, he kind of attributed to greater, uh, uh, a greater degree of classicism, linearity, um, sort of spatial illusionism, whereas the Baroque obviously features heightened drama, lots of tenebrism, emotional kind of sensationalism, and so forth. I'm sure all of us have had the classics slide by slide comparison. I know I did when I was an undergrad. That again was so essential in Wölfflin's method. But as this pertains to my teaching at CCS, so I always assign a formal analysis of all my students. They are instructed to go to the DIA. I either take them on a field trip, or if we have class on Monday, they're instructed to go at some point on their own to the DIA. They are to pick any artwork of their choice, of their choosing, within the DI's collections, and simply write a formal analysis. So analyze the work in terms of its formal elements and design principles. So, line, color, space, texture, shape, rhythm, pattern, movement, etc. Right? What have I found? I've found, well, for the most part, I would say maybe 80% of students, 85%, a good majority of students are doing their own work. They are coming in, turning in work that is legitimately their own. But again, I do get essays or assignments that are turned in that are without a doubt AI generated. And again, I do use AI detectors myself, but most of the time I can tell because I give little short writing prompts in class, and I can tell when a text is not in a student's voice. So the issue that I feel is so critical is that we are producing art and design students, and they can't themselves either. Obviously, there's an issue of academic integrity and so forth, but putting honor code stuff aside, the problem is, what if they are actually turning it in thinking that their instructors will not be able to tell what is artificial? What if they themselves cannot tell what is artificial about the text, right, that they're turning in? So we really need to be producing students who are very critical of kind of AI generated imagery, AI generated text. So in order to kind of remedy this, right, we need to beat them to the punch, right? So have them engage with AI in class, right? So one thing that I've started doing, and I started doing it basically this spring, was to actually put them to task. I first have them do a formal analysis comparing, two works, and here I'm just showing you randomly two works that I had them compare at the very beginning of our semester, like in the first 2 weeks of class. One is a piece by Fra Angelico, The Annunciation. The other is Sandro Botticelli's Birth of Venus. I have them first conduct their own formal analyses of both works, right? They jot down notes on their own, then they compare with a partner, think, pair, share. They then discuss against their partner's readings what their descriptions are of the respective artworks. Then with their partner, I have them run it through various AI programs, either ChatGPT or Gemini. I haven't tried Anthropic or Anthropic's Claude or Perplexity yet, but again, perhaps it would generate different results. That would also be kind of an interesting experiment to see how the differences compare across different AI platforms. But I want them to kind of analyze what their own verbiage was vis-a-vis these artworks and what kinds of descriptors and adjectives and so forth ChatGPT is coming up with, right? So again, we need to kind of let them directly engage with it. We already know they're using it, even though some of them are vehemently opposed to AI, at least on a surface level. We know that they're using it for all sorts of other purposes in their everyday lives, right? Maybe something for a literary oriented class. There was a New York Times piece recently about having students detect which story ChatGPT wrote, and there's like a list of short stories. So anyways, you could ostensibly even play this podcast, the podcasted version of this article in class and have students kind of think about it. So we need to get them to become critical of what it generates, right? One thing that I oftentimes do when I'm trying to think of assignments for my courses, obvious, and I'm sure all of you do the same process, I work backwards. So I try to think about my student learning outcomes. What is it that I want my students to come out of an assignment with? What are the essential skills, the kind of, what is the critical thinking mindset, or what is it that I want students to reflect on or to mediate on or what have you, vis-a-vis a certain set of materials or content. And then I design the assignment. So the Cornell Center for Teaching Innovation has a great resource on kind of how to use AI in assignment design. I found this to be very helpful. The other thing that I find to be useful, and I might even do this I haven't done this exercise yet in some of my classes, but I have found amongst like the concept, particularly in concept design and game design, and even some other fields, but particularly those two, I found some students, and again, it's not all, but I found some students, they're so entrenched in their subfields that sometimes they can't see the forest from the trees. And I find oftentimes, and again, I'm an art historian, I'm very sensitive to cultural appropriation and so forth. I find that some students appropriate from other cultures, but without necessarily either A, crediting the original cultures from which a certain motif or style or practice emanates, or there's just a sort of blindness or a lack of curiosity about where certain cultural practices come from and so forth. So one thing that I think would be helpful, again, for probably all of us to engage with on some level is to get them, and again, this speaks to one of Vince's points, to get them to think about algorithmic biases regarding the kinds of racial and ethnic biases that are reproduced and regenerated through AI prompts. Right. So what is it that AI is spitting out that actually reinforces many of our own prejudices? And so, anyways, I think this is possibly a really fruitful exercise. The University of Wisconsin-Madison, I never had her as a professor as an undergrad, but I've heard wonderful things about her. Her name is Anna Andrzejewski. She's a scholar of American art and architecture. She teaches a course entirely on Frank Lloyd Wright, and she had students actually take one of Frank Lloyd Wright's works. And again, he did architectural projects all across the world, from, Japan to, even he had some commissions in Baghdad and obviously all over the Midwestern part of the United States. But she had students take one of his projects. Each student was assigned a different project and try to, ask AI to come up with a research paper regarding that specific architectural project. And oftentimes what she found was that AI was spitting out kind of these regurgitated, kind of hackneyed descriptions about all of Frank Lloyd Wright's being in the prairie style. Now, obviously, many of his pieces were indeed in the prairie style, but we do know that across the board, he had a lot of variation, a lot of, kind of stylistic changes and shifts in his development as an architect and so forth. So she used it as an opportunity to kind of get students to be critical about the types of sources that AI was drawing from. And oftentimes it was drawing from stuff written in blogs by enthusiasts, right? It wasn't drawing from scholarship and academic writing on the subject. So anyways, another potential. This is another assignment in which students have to compile or compose their own digital exhibition of an artistic movement. So I haven't tried this, but it's an interesting one. Now, in terms of how I use AI to kind of ideate and come up with classroom activities, various things have been tried, I've heard, amongst my colleagues, but also amongst even our, all of our fellow instructors in liberal arts. I'll go through some of these. Last fall, I had the pleasure of sitting in on one of my instructors for the Intro to Material Culture course. And for this particular unit, we were talking about the relationship of material objects and imagery to the issue of ownership and kind of symbolic capital and cultural capital. According to my adjunct instructor, Amy Davis, I sat in on her specific section, and what she had done, obviously it's a very meaty topic. As Vince said, for many of our neurodiverse students, it's hard for them to digest even one article, let alone two in a class period. It's very hard for them to synthesize arguments across articles, right? And even synthesizing articles with a lecture as well. So what she had done is she instructed AI to come up with a podcast that was like 15 or 20 minutes in length. And let me tell you, the result was astounding. I mean, I gave her a glowing teaching observation because the students were just so engaged. I hadn't seen a discussion in class. They listened to the podcast that AI had generated, but the students were engaged. They were asking really interesting questions, responding to one another, really listening to one another. And again, part of that may be the kind of natural chemistry of her particular section, but I think part of it is in part due to the kind of engaging conversational style of a podcast, right? It's meant to be entertaining.
Nancy, just to interrupt, this is your 2-minute warning.
Okay, thank you. I'm almost towards the end. Thank you. One thing that I also have done myself, not this specific case study, usually when I have students engage in debate, it's regarding the return of Nigerian Benin bronzes, but I kind of fed this prompt into Gemini yesterday as I was preparing for this talk, and it gave a pretty good case study, I thought. The prompt is asking students to kind of engage in a debate about the repatriation of sacred objects to indigenous peoples. And again, I was very vague in the prompt about what indigenous groups I wanted this particular case study to engage with, but it came up with these Zuni Pueblo Ayuda sculptures, which are wooden sculptures. Typically, they can be war gods, but they can be deities dedicated to a number of things within the kind of Zuni pantheon. But anyways, the AI came up with a pretty interesting debating scenario for students to engage with subjects of the ethics of repatriation. Does an encyclopedic museum truly have the rights of stewardship over some of these sacred objects? I'm showing you an example that the Met apparently returned in October of 1994. The last thing that I definitely have used AI with myself is, sometimes, it's due to brain fog or whatever the case may be. I haven't reviewed or brushed up on a specific topic in a while. I need a refresher myself. So oftentimes what I will do is I will literally, again, tell either AI or ChatGPT, whatever my topic for a given day, right? I'll feed it the content that I'm actually teaching on, and I'll have it kind of come up with a truncated outline. And again, this is not anything I distribute to students. It's just something that I use myself so that I can kind of be, quickly refreshed, a kind of primer on a given topic, right? I'm not trained as a fashion historian. I'm an art and architectural historian, although I have taught extensively on fashion in the past, but I don't consider myself an expert necessarily on the subject. So I do use it to kind of distill even scholarly articles that I have drawn, from our databases, from the library and so forth. So that, again, I've pasted some extra resources. This is from the CCS Faculty Development Day. I thought, I did go through this again. This is very helpful. I'm sure all of you have also experimented with this. This is distributed last August. Harvard has some really wonderful resources too on teaching with generative AI and kind of novel ways of experimenting with it, as well as Stanford. Stanford has a resource called Craft, Classroom Ready Resources for AI about AI for Teaching, developed by School of Education, and there's different classroom activities that professors can use. And then again, one that I might even use next fall when I start the Global Art History pre-1400 course, pertains to Nazca drawings in ancient Peru, and so forth. Another one is directly engaging students with the very basic discussion of AI in artistic creation, and how has the idea of disruption kind of caused a landmine in the art and design world before. So anyways, these are just some food for thought. I'm happy to end my slideshow. Stop share. Sorry.
Thank you so much to both Nancy and Vince for your wonderful presentations, and also all of the resources that you shared at the end of both of them. I think that those will be really fruitful. And now we have about 15 minutes for Q&A. I had a couple questions come through in the chat, so we could start with those if you guys want. Liz, I had a question from you. Is it okay if I ask it, or would you like to?
Go right ahead.
Okay, sorry. This was a question for Vince, and you asked, did you find that students reverse engineer any discussion points that were edited out of the articles when they were summarized? And then your other question was, is that the point with the symposium format?
Yeah. So, so let me tell you first I should probably tell you what I edit out. And I noticed that Amy Davis used one of the articles that she was using in that prompt that Nancy showed was Russell Belk's famous essay, Possessions in the Extended Self. And of course, that's a key essay in basically the anthropology class for fashion students, which I guess is now going to be in liberal arts. Awesome. Should have been there before. And also in the consumer culture class. And so what I have edited out, if you know that article, there's a whole bunch of stuff with the philosophical basis, Sartre, all of this stuff that quite honestly students that is completely, from the point of view of the academic arguments being made among a community of scholars, important stuff. For students, they don't care. And it's actually kind of just getting in the way of things that I want them to know about the categories that Belk talks about in the way in which we use possessions as forms of self-identity. So the first thing that we read in class after we've done a little bit of history is a thing about consumer culture theory and the categories of how we consume as an identity construction, how we use consumption to identify with others, the institutions within which we conduct our consumer selves, and the ideologies behind it. And so, so those are the kinds of things that I take out of those articles. In the case of the global theme park, there was a lot of stuff in there that was just reporting statistics that, given the fact that the articles, they're not, published yesterday, again, the statistics are not the point. And so what I kind of look for is if they start using the language and start engaging in the concepts. And also, there's a whole other part of the classroom activity. The first being that I'm having them do journals based on what we're reading. And one of the ways that I'm grading is, are you using the language that was in that article and applying it to the journal I'm asking you to write about? So this week's journal is about spaces of consumption. Go someplace. Tell me what you see. Who are the people? How are they dressed? What is the division between who's consuming, who's not? How is the space set up? What's the backstory? And so, again, the point is to get to the meat of what it is I want them to know, and taking out a lot of the stuff that is basically kind of again, as a scholar myself, I'm hugely interested in that conversation. But That's not what I need the students to know. And so that I guess is the answer to that question. I mean, I'm really, and the other thing I should say is that those conversations and those projects are ungraded. But the students take them seriously. They enjoy them. We have a great conversation afterward, and I'm happy enough with that. And then, we buttress the other things that they have to work on. Similarly, they have a semester-long research project, which is, divided into 4 parts. The first part being, what are you going to write about? And by the way, you have to go to the library and like get actual books. And then you have to tell me what you read. Then you have to do the deliverable, and then finally you give a presentation. So I'm also very big on in-class presentations, and those are graded. And then if you can tell me standing up without, reading off a piece of paper what your thing is about, then I have an idea that you actually know what you're talking about. And I've only had a couple of instances where I felt like, yeah, I'm kind of suspicious about what this thing is. And I basically just have the student meet with me, and then I say, okay, great, tell me about this. Where did you get this information? And you can, it doesn't take too long before they finally figure out that you're on to them, and, they have to then come clean. And so, what I do in that case is just say, okay, great, you got to do this over.
Nancy, sorry.
All right.
I saw you nodding, Nancy, and I wondered, how do you approach these situations with your students?
I do the exact same thing that Vince does. I summon them to my office for a conversation. I say, listen, I can't grade this until we discuss it in person. And then usually, exactly as Vince said, it's just, and it ends up coming to the surface so very quickly. And I've even had students just burst into tears too, because they know that I'm confronting them.
And again, I'm not again. So just to understand, and I'm very clear. First of all, I'm very clear with the students of how I'm using AI. Number one, but the other thing is I keep saying I'm here to educate, not evaluate. Right? This is not about you did it wrong. I'm going to give you a timeout or a punishment. No, this is about iteration.
Yeah, and I do have them redo the assignment and for full credit. So I completely wipe out their first attempt, and they're allowed to try again. And I actually tell them all the time, none of us, even experts, right, or writers and academics, et cetera, we never get something right the first time. So the purpose is effort and to learn from failure, right? And really try to emphasize learning from failure. So
I love to hear that, and I love that you offer them all that opportunity for growth. I was wondering if anyone else has a question that they'd like to ask. If not, Vince had a question at the beginning, and I have one as well.
I had a question.
Yes. Oh, you wanted to just discuss overall.
Yes, yeah. I'm,
folks
because
are
again,
using
Q&A,
AI.
like as
Yes.
Nancy says, I'm not an expert on this. I'm as lost in the fun house as everybody else is. I will say that in the current in the consumer culture class, I do have a student who's writing their paper on the deleterious effects of AI on the film industry. And I had a student who did that last semester, last time I taught this class. And it's pretty interesting. And the other thing is when you let them kind of like do their thing, they do an amazing amount of research. I can't believe, like in the in-class presentations, they have to report on their sources. That's their last slide. And it's like, oh my God, you read all that stuff. If I had told you to do it, you wouldn't have done it. But, anyway. And so I was just kind of interested. I mean, I know like Matt has shared with me his document that he's been kind of collecting of all the AI kinds of things. First of all, I got to ask you a question. If I wanted to share that with my students, would you be okay with that? You're muted. Okay, great. Excellent.
Yes. Sorry, I was muted.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, because,
absolutely. You can share that.
All right, great. Because again, they're hugely concerned with this stuff.
Definitely.
Matt, do you want to share really quickly what Luke did in your class, State of Viz, about the price of the prompt?
Yes. I don't know, some of you may have seen this, but last year I taught a data visualization class, and one of my students, Luke Fabricatori, did an excellent project. Data visualization is taking data and data sets and then trying to humanize it, trying to create some type of story and hopefully create empathy with that. Luke looked at the data and data sets about um, the energy consumption with AI, and he created a really great interactive piece that asks a series of just a couple of questions. I think it was 3 questions, and basically, how often are you using AI? How often are you using it in a week, in a day? And you would answer these simple questions with this little turn dial thing. And then based on those answers, it would say this is how much energy is being used. But what was really smart about the piece was he created a whole series of visual like analogies to help us relate to how much energy is being used. So instead of saying, oh, you're using X amount of kilowatts, it's this is how many light bulbs could have been used with the energy that was generated from your AI, 1 week of AI usage. Or here's how much water was used, and he showed bathtubs being filled up. So, that's a big part of the class too, is how do we think about metaphors and analogies that help us relate to that data. And it was a really great piece. And then we submitted it to the Communication Arts Interactive Annual. And not only did it get in, but it actually got Best in Show, which was really great.
That's incredible. I think we have about 4 more minutes for questions, and I know Gil has one. So Gil. Oh, and I think you're muted. Sorry.
Yeah, it's just a comment. Boy, am I glad that I got on the call. I think that this discussion, although it's generated around the idea of AI, is the bridge for our development as an institution and a culture, particularly when you start talking about consumerism and how cultures have been borrowed from and not credited, right? And if we could make our students aware of how important that is, right? In talking about the general population, I think it could be a great, great segue into bigger conversations about the importance and significance and power of identity, and particularly as creative artists, as creative people, as a creative community. So, wow, thank you. And I mentioned in a comment that I would hope that the next belonging event, which takes place in late March, could have some representation and input, from this discussion. When I was a student, I didn't have this type of broad awareness. And so I think that because this is the age when we shape our society, you could become a warrior or a doctor or an artist. This is the point to have those discussions. So awesome, guys. Thank you.
So I just, Anthony put in a little comment about what he's going to use, Anthony Reale, who's one of my former students. And actually, Nancy, you should take a look at, he did this amazing paper when he took art history, where he like figured out something that the DIA got wrong about one of the paintings. It's amazing. But he and I have had some great conversations. And so that's the other thing. The cross kind of conversation between, especially in the liberal arts department versus what's happening in studio, is just hugely important. And so, first of all, I just want to thank Anthony for that. And then also Matt, because he shared that stuff with me. And it's really important to tie those things in. Just a comment.
Thank you so much. I think that this has been, this has left me very excited about all the work that you are doing, and also all the amazing work that our students have been doing too. Thank you so much for sharing. I want to thank again Dr. Nancy Demerdash and Dr. Vince Carducci for their presentations today. Thank you all so much for joining us and having a great discussion. A recording of this session will be shared later, and please also be on the lookout for the next faculty professional development lecture in the fall semester. And we will continue the conversation offline, I am sure.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.